Hello, everyone, and welcome into another episode of the Giant Take Podcast, another losing episode of the podcast, episode number 350 as well. Alex, happy 350. There you go. How you doing?
I've been better, Josh. Yeah, the Giants suck. They don't have a lot of hope for the rest of the season, if any. And yeah, it's really frustrating to see your team lose against probably the worst team in football. The talent level on the other side far I guess is a lot lower, I should say, than our side. And we still, throughout most of the game just got manhandled, despite what the scoreline actually said at the end, it felt like. And this was a game that, the Giants, it's one of the few games the Giants I felt like had a chance of winning or had a good chance of winning above 50%. And the fact that they just were non-competitive almost, it felt like it was demoralizing and a humiliating defeat, overseas in Germany, and not the type of product you're trying to put out there when you're trying to attract new fans across the pond, as some say. So, yeah, it's not ideal for the Giants on the field wise. For draft order, maybe, but it just really, really frustrating to watch and really upsetting to watch as a fan. I think is pretty accurate in terms of how I'm describing most fans' feelings towards this.
Yeah, Alex, there's really no better way to put it than you just did. But I will say that this team is atrocious in their play. This was one of the most boring football games I might have ever watched, like in my lifetime. Um, One of the poorest displays of an offense I've ever seen. Whatever Brian Dable and whatever Daniel Jones put together, they really cooked a burnt meal for sure. It was not it was not good at all. And I know we normally do offense defense, Alex, but I think we really do have to kind of like go a little recappy of this game, just because of some moments that were unreal, especially towards the end of the game. But I first want to talk about going into halftime, because going into halftime, there was one play that I thought was going to change the entire trajectory of the rest of the season. And that was when Daniel Jones was looking and scrambling right and literally throws right into a defensive lineman's hands for an interception. At least it tipped into their hands when they were throwing up to try and knock the ball down, and they ended up grabbing it. So I guess lucky that they were able to grab it off the tip, but still, Daniel Jones fires one of his finest interceptions for sure. And on that play, all of Giants Twitter, along with beat reporters, were saying, that's it. That's the last we're going to see of Daniel Jones this season and in his New York Giants career. And Alex, you know what it did? And it was the one time yesterday, what it did as we're recording Monday morning, like 24 hours after the game ended. It gave me hope. It gave me hope for this future of this team, that Daniel Jones was not going to be on the field anymore. And what happens? Well, the Panthers punt in 5-6 plays, and we go into halftime with one Daniel Jones kneel. Comes back, so we're thinking, all right, that's interesting. Back on the field for that one play. And then he comes back in the second half, and first drive leads the Giants to a touchdown, which is one that he rushes in himself. Or that was the Tyrone Tracy.
That was the
That was
second.
the
Yeah, that
Tyrone
was the
Tracy
tire.
touchdown, excuse me. Which, by the way, you want to talk about any bright spot on this team? That's one of the maybe four.
Yeah, you can count it on one hand, Josh. That's definitely the case. But yeah, I was surprised but not shocked, I think is the fair way to describe it for Daniel Jones coming back into the game after half. I generally don't think Dable is the type of coach to make a QB change mid-game, just in the way he's been coaching this season. So I do think next game there is a better chance that Daniel Jones is not playing. I would still say it's a sub 50% chance that he's not playing based
He's
on what
got
we've
2 weeks
seen.
to make a decision.
Yeah, he's got 2 weeks. The bye week definitely makes the decision easier if he does want to make the switch. But I would still say, if I was a betting man, that it's more on the unlikely side than the likely side. But uh, a fan could hope, as they say. But yeah, really, really disappointing stuff. And Daniel Jones, obviously, would throw another interception later in the game, and it's just he's missing on that. Honestly, for me, Josh, it's not even as much the turnovers, which of course are frustrating, but it's the inaccuracies of certain balls and the situations he's putting receivers in. Right? It's he's misfiring. He's not putting the ball ahead of his receiver. He's putting it behind the receiver. He's throwing to a wide open Malik Neighbors, who he apparently thinks is 10 feet tall, and is just like he's wide open. There was this one throw. It was end of first half. I think it was right before that pick, actually, Josh. Literally, Malik Neighbors. It's like a curl route. He's wide open, like 10 yards open. He overthrows him probably like
It's a viral
it
clip
probably hit,
where he threw it
yeah,
out of bounds, right?
it probably hit
Is that what
the
you're talking
fans in the
about?
head. That was
Yeah.
so missed. Like it was ridiculous. It was
The
ridiculous from
Wandell
an NFL quarterback.
the Wandell Robinson open route where he is fuming because he's wide open and Daniel Jones instead
Yeah.
takes the sack. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
the
those
flea
simple
flicker.
things.
Yeah.
The flea flicker, yes. Wide open.
Now
Daniel
now
Jones takes the
granted,
sack.
here's the thing. The flea flicker on 3rd and 1 is an absolutely insane play call by Brian Dable. I don't like that at all. Just get the first down. The Giants struggle with these
It
types of
worked
plays.
out. It works out though. That doesn't. He's wide open. We have a decent quarterback that works out.
I
Wandell
get it,
Robinson's
but he
wide
should know
open.
we don't have a decent quarterback. He should know we don't have a decent quarterback, and he should
I
know,
don't, Alex. I
like,
don't blame that on Brian Dable. Come on,
I mean,
you have to. But here's the thing: he knows we don't have a decent quarterback. But at the end of the day, it's his football team. He has to at least believe. He can't just be like, I understand where it's like, yes, design the plays, but so then what do we do? Run the ball every time because we know we have a bad quarterback. Have 5-yard in routes every time. Like you have to somehow diversify the playbook while understanding what you have at that position and how good the arm and which Daniel Jones apparently has a good arm. We've seen it before. Um, I understand that you don't like that play call. I think it was a good play call because it worked because we had our receiver open. It's just that Daniel Jones sucks, so we can't get it to him and doesn't read the field well. And that's
but
bottom
Josh,
line.
you could put it the other way too, that it didn't work because Daniel Jones sucks and he
But
wasn't able
that's
to
not
get it
on
off.
Brian Dable. That's not on Brian Dable.
But here, I'll say this though, like a couple games ago, remember when he was running those 2nd and 1 QB sneaks? That was not I have confidence in my QB play. So I was kind of interested to see that he went from that to trusting Daniel Jones on
Hey,
a
I'll tell
more
you.
gimmick play.
I'll tell you, the Panthers are the worst defense in the NFL. They allow about 35 points per game. The New York Giants scored 17 points in this game. There you go.
Yeah.
That's your answer.
Fair enough.
That's your
Fair
answer.
enough.
Simple
It's
enough.
just
They have an awful defense. So Brian Dable said, hey, with our weapons that we have, we're going to explore and what's the word? And expose those weaknesses.
yeah.
They failed to do that. Why? Because they had Daniel Jones on their team. I want to talk about that second interception because that was not Jones's fault. One of the rare times I will say that goes in and out of Tyrone Tracy's hands. And what a poor day.
But Josh, here's the other thing. I would say that one though. That one was thrown completely behind him in a way that allowed
Alex, that is I'm actually defending Jones, which you don't see me do often. That ball, I don't care how it's thrown in a certain degree after a certain point because that was literally in his hands. That's not you cannot blame Jones on that throw. That was in Tracy's hands. It literally went in and bobbled out and into the defender as he's tackling him.
I mean, but it wasn't bobbled necessarily as much as the defender was able to pull it out because of the fact that the ball was in between Tracy and the defender. If it was on the other side of Tracy, that's also another. No, I'm not saying it's purely Daniel Jones's fault, right? Tyrone Tracy obviously needs to fight for that ball better. But Daniel Jones did not put him in a situation where there was no possibility of that happening, which he could have very easily done if he placed the ball to the outside of the numbers. That's just my
Well,
perspective on it.
well, anyway, how lucky are we that the Panthers' defense or offense as well is atrocious? Because that after that
Thank God.
interception, they go 3 plays, 127 yards before punting. But then we just play the punt game until the very end, where we see Graham Gano, a player the New York Giants didn't send out for a 52-yard field goal earlier in the game, which was Brian Dable saying, "Hey guys, he's still injured. This is concerning." Then Graham Gano misses a field goal from 43 yards. So let's bring him out, have him trot himself onto the field to kick a game-tying field goal to send this game to overtime from 42, 1 yard in. And what does Gano do? He nails it. And we're going to overtime. And again, one of the most atrocious football games I've ever seen. And does it get any more atrocious? First play, the first play from the line of scrimmage. The Giants win the coin toss. Maybe the best thing Daniel Jones has done all day. He wins a coin toss and hands the ball off, and Tyrone Tracy gets it punched out. And all the Panthers need to do within the 30, 25-yard line, run the ball a few times, get a game-winning field goal. It's overdone. And in Munich, the Panthers are champions, you can say, and they win. And when they go back to the United States, they'll find out they're not so good, and they're 3-7. But they can call themselves the champions of Germany for right now, in terms of the NFL. Yeah, I mean, poor day for the kid for sure. I feel for Tracy. You saw him breaking down on the bench. Those are one of the games that I think through the career that he will have that, from what it looks like, the bright spots are really, really bright. I think he really does have a future in front of him. And so, this is one of those games that he will look back on, I'm sure, not just for today, not just for tomorrow, but for a long time. But then, hopefully he has a really illustrious career, and 5 to 10 years down the line, he's like, hey, remember that game in my rookie year where that interception was on me and that fumble, had us losing the game. Like, that was really bad. But, it was a learning curve. This is really what that is for him, that this is a learning stage for him to bounce back and I guess learn from these mistakes. But at the end of the day, it was on him. I think he knows that. But I did really feel for the kid on the sideline. I mean, that's tough, especially for a rookie.
Yeah, and obviously I honestly think that these learning experiences, especially when you're a rookie, like they're invaluable in some sense. They're obviously devastating in the moment, but Tyrone Tracy, when it's OT in the rest of his career, he'll be holding onto that ball tight because he's going to remember that play for the rest of his career. And obviously it's terrible for him, but in the case of the Giants, at least it wasn't in a super critical game where the Giants, obviously their season is over at this point already, whether they won this Panthers game or not. And from that standpoint, at least it didn't have a huge detrimental effect on the team. If anything, a lot of fans were actually celebrating him fumbling because they are rooting for the tank here for the Giants to make sure that they get the highest possible pick in the draft. And I don't necessarily root for the Giants to lose. I never do that. I don't have it in me to root for my team to lose. And, it is what it is. And it's obviously really upsetting and tough for him. And, he had a great game, though. I think people need to remember, right? He had over 100 yards rushing. He even got involved in the passing game a little bit. So there was some bright spots there for Tyrone Tracy that we hadn't even seen.
You want to talk about positive glimpses? You want to talk about some positive glimpses of what this guy could be in the future? Just watch that touchdown, that rushing touchdown on replay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's got that burst. Once he gets into the open field, he is very quick. On it, like, he ran a 4.51, I believe, in the draft, in the combine, excuse me. So people are kind of like, does he really have that breakaway speed? We always talk about it, but sometimes those 40-yard dash numbers are not exactly representative of what someone runs like when they got pads on and the football under their arm. And Tyrone Tracy runs with power. He runs with determination. And he even pulled out a couple of spin moves here, a little Saquon Barkley-esque. I know I sound like Chris Collinsworth with the Mahomey comparisons now, but here we are. He was pulling out some of those moves. There's obviously still some things that, he's not a natural runner, right? Quite yet, just because he's only played this position for 2 years. And you can see that there's certain times where he doesn't read the gaps properly or he doesn't see an open hole. But when he does get those and when he makes the most of those opportunities, he can be very, very special. And that's something that's really fun to see on this offense. I guess kind of transitioning to the one other thing I want to talk about on this offense, Malik Neighbors. We know how talented he is. Obviously, it's very tough for him just because he's relying on Daniel Jones to get him the ball, whereas Tyrone Tracy is just relying on Daniel Jones to hand him off the ball. But we need to see more of Malik Neighbors. I don't know whether that's designing more, plays for him, whether that is telling Daniel Jones he needs to specifically find Malik Neighbors. But when he has the ball in his hands, he is so special and he can make some crazy catches. And the fact that we're kind of wasting his rookie year at this point, I almost feel like is really, really upsetting based on what we saw earlier in the season when Daniel Jones was able to connect a couple of passes.
And is that still looming from the concussion? Is Malik Neighbors fully healthy? I think this is still a question mark because, Alex, you're completely right. Ever since he's returned from that, the numbers just aren't there to support it. And I don't know if that's a Giants playbook on offense issue or if that's literally because Malik Neighbors isn't as good as he was back in the first few weeks of the season. I don't know. And that's an answer I think that only Malik Neighbors knows, and we don't know for sure. Let's talk about a player let's talk about this defense now. I don't want to say it wasn't hard, but it's the Carolina Panthers. So, forcing them to 20 points, I guess good job. I will say my player to watch, but Chuba Hubbard, 28 carries. They relied on him heavily, over 150 yards, about 5.5 yards per carry, and he had a touchdown in this game. Bryce Young, you want to talk about failures as well. Not only Daniel Jones, but the future for him is slim. The future for him is, I think, a backup quarterback in this league for sure. And then past that point, they really have no pass catcher. So, yeah, credit to the Giants defense, sure. But Alex, I think it's the story of our lives, the story of this season. Defense holding strong, offense can't do anything, and that's really obvious. Except for the fact that I will say defense had no really QB pressures in this game. 1 sack only. That's now back-to-back weeks. I don't think they had any sacks the prior week. So, something that I would hope to see more of for the rest of the year. Again, I don't even know how much they feel into these games anymore. Now it comes that you're at 2-8. Now it's really a factor of who wants it anymore, because these players are people too. So when they have a 2-8 record, as much as they want to go out there and fight as hard as they can to get a victory, at the same time it's we're tired. Do we really even want to give this extra effort? We're gonna lose anyway. We suck anyway. We'll get a top 3 pick, and at the end of the day, sure, they're getting paid millions and millions of dollars to go out there and perform, but it's also a level of how much do they care? And when you're losing a lot of games in a row, you're not gonna really care. So
you look at even Dexter Lawrence post game; he looks so demoralized talking about this Giants team, and it's. I will say this, right? The Giants defense, they've been playing acceptable, in the recent couple of weeks. I wouldn't say they played badly in this one, but I wouldn't say they played great either. Chuba Hubbard, he's a okay running back in this league. I don't think anyone's going to say he's a elite running back. And the fact that he goes for 150 yards plus on you is something that is just not acceptable, considering the defensive line that they have and the linebackers that they have. And, there was a lot of missed tackles in this game that was very, apparent, especially by the DBs, specifically Deontay Banks and Cordell Flott. I'm going to call out on this one, but those two guys were missing tackles left and right. And I almost turned off the TV. It was unwatchable at times to see just Chuba Hubbard just running through those guys because they cannot tackle. And it's really, really important. And I think the most underrated trait, and I've seen scouts talk about this, I've seen GMs talk about this, the most underrated trait in DBs is tackling, because it's something that comes up a lot more than you think, that a DB needs to wrap up on a tackle. Because whenever DBs are tackling, it's usually a one-on-one situation. It's just them and the offensive player, and you've got to be able to wrap them up. And it's something that the Giants DBs have struggled with for years and years and years. The last Giant DB that I remember being pretty good tackler was James Bradbury. But besides that, even Adoree Jackson in his prime was struggling tackling wise. And, even all these elite corners that we've had, or I should say more elite corners, never that we had super elite corners, but they always struggled. That was always their weak point. And the Giants now have less than elite corners, and they also have that weak point. And it's something that is really, really scary in the run game, because when you get a runner, say, if you're facing a Derrick Henry type, if we face Derrick Henry, God knows what would happen, Josh. He'd probably go for 300 yards, 400 yards. Like, who's tackling him? I'm not seeing Cordell Flott or Deontay Banks tackling Derrick Henry one-on-one. That I can tell you.
The only thing that would, make me feel better about playing against Derrick Henry is that he's not in his prime anymore, but he's still a damn good running back in the NFL. So,
yeah,
I'll tell you that much. Alex, I don't know what else to really touch on. The last thing I have here is we already mentioned Malik Neighbors, but the other receivers around him, they all really kind of had the same impact. It was 4 to 6 catches split between Hyatt, Johnson, Neighbors, and Robinson for no more than 60 yards, 55 yards. So, that's it. That's really it.
yeah.
So where do we go from here? I guess we'll leave it at that. You have Pat Leonard of the New York Daily News writing a very, very big headline article about Brian Dable and Joe Shea need to be fired for how bad this game ended up and how bad the season is going. I think Alex and I agree that's not the route that the Giants are going to take, nor do they need to take. I really do think, for me personally, at the end of the day, the Giants needed a new quarterback. It's plain and simple. I think they knew they needed a new quarterback last season. The board just didn't fall their way in terms of who they wanted to select, that they could have drafted one. So now that yes, did they, mess up in the way that they should have drafted a quarterback last year? For sure. But Joe Shane had his guys at the quarterback position that he did want. Those players were already off the board. Jaden Daniels. And, that leaves you in this position now where you have this kind of waste of a season. You kind of have to put it that way before you draft a new one. I don't think Joe Shea needs to be gone. I don't think Brian Dable needs to be gone. I really do think this starts at the most important position, and that is at quarterback. See what happens when we have a rookie, a different guy that is the signal caller, and then let's go from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very difficult situation. I will say that. The results point to getting rid of both of them, obviously. But you have to look at the bigger picture, I think. And at this point, I'm not even referencing 2022 because, yes, that was a very successful season. That was the most successful Giants season probably in 10 years. But I think what you have to look at is that have they really had a fair shake at this since then? I think there's been some mistakes, right? Joe Shane has made some mistakes. The Daniel Jones contract is obviously one of the bigger ones. The Saquon Barkley, letting go of Saquon could potentially be one that is brought up in the next few years. The drafts haven't been excellent. I think there's definitely some reasons to get rid of him, but I do think you cannot just keep changing over and over again these regimes every 2-3 years and expect some sort of consistent output. I'd let them draft this time around. And also, for those who are saying, I know it's very popular too, just get rid of Shane or just get rid of Dable. They're a package, man. They're a package. They either both go or they both stay. And I feel very strongly about that. And I think I also don't think John Mara has it in him to fire another regime this quickly. I think he's going to give them one more year. They're probably going to get a new quarterback. They're probably going to draft one. And in that case, depending on how that quarterback looks initially, I think is going to be very much dependent on whether they get another season after that. And that's kind of my prediction there. And this team has the pieces. I expect them. They're going to get rid of Daniel Jones. They're going to bring in some sort of, I guess, gap quarterback, a Jacoby Brissett-ish quarterback, draft one, and we'll have to wait and see how that season goes. And I think that's going to be very heavily dependent on how they do. But short answer, I don't think they should go at the end of the season.
And it's funny, Alex, because I remember vividly last season having a conversation of, oh my gosh, it's only this month and we're going to start draft prep already for quarterbacks and other positions. I think it was a little bit later. I think it was like late November, like early December. And we were like, oh my God, I can't believe we're starting draft prep already. But I can say that now in mid-November. And I even could have probably said it like a month ago, but in mid-November, I'm going to say that, I might start doing my draft prep. Why not get ahead of it? Because that's what we're going to be looking for. And I pose that question of, if it's going to be a quarterback, this is sort of a weaker class. We don't really know where we're going to look right now. Is it Shedeur Sanders, Deion Sanders' son, out of Colorado? I hope not. The only player that I see that I really do enjoy watching on a weekly basis, who had a unfortunate game on Saturday in the way that his team lost, Cam Ward out of Miami. That dude is a baller. That dude has a heck of an arm. And that is one player that I would not be upset in a New York Giants jersey. Obviously we're going to talk about a lot more of these guys down the line towards our draft, but it's really time to start digging into these quarterbacks, see what they have. And that's for you also watching and listening. If you're not a huge college football fan, that's fine. But you now have about a month or two to really kind of look at those top 3, top 5 guys, because it seems like the Giants are going to have a top 3, top 5 pick. And, find out who you like. Find out who you want to see the New York Giants draft. Because, come April, they're going to be deeply searching for a new quarterback. Daniel Jones is done. So looking ahead to next week now, Giants are off. They have a bye, so we can actually enjoy our weekend for once. That'll be fun. And then down the line, the following week, the Giants will take on the Buccaneers for a 1:00 game, and we'll preview that. And I'm sure we'll probably have an episode later this week. Maybe even, that might be fun, Alex. Maybe a way too early quarterback preview
Discussion.
to the draft class. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was actually looking at them. It's funny you mentioned. I'm really not a fan of my, at least initial looks of this draft. I mean,
it's a weak QB class for sure.
Yeah. I'll say this. I'll just talk about one guy before we wrap up the episode.
Okay, real quick, because maybe we'll do that later this week.
Yeah. I don't want to, Shedeur Sanders. I'm not even going to talk about his play. I think he would absolutely crumble in the New York media. I think he would get absolutely destroyed.
He is not. Let's save our thoughts. He's not an NFL QB, and I'm going to leave it at that. And people can take that as they will. Maybe we'll talk about it later. But thank you so much for listening and or watching to this entire episode. I know it's tough. It's tough for us to sit here and record every week and talk about a team that's 2-8. The Giants lose on a game-winning field goal in overtime, 20-17 against. Well, do I even call them the worst team in football anymore? We are the worst team in football.
We are. Second worst according to the draft order, but worst definitely.
We are the worst team in football. The New York Giants lose to the Carolina Panthers. Subscribe wherever you're listening and or watching. Our social medias are on the Giant Take Pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Alex on Twitter at Norian23. I'm on Twitter at JoshSolo29. Thank you. That's all I got.
Yeah, I mean it's a rough one. It's a rough one, and keep your head up high, Giants fans. It'll get better at some point, hopefully before I die. I know that's what people are saying at this point, but it's really tough to watch this team, and they have to get better. I don't know if they will. in the near future, but there has to be some positive hope ahead. They cannot be this terrible forever is what I'm going to end it on. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening, and hope everyone has a great week and enjoys their New York Giants bye week as well. Go out and do something fun next Sunday and
Do what
enjoy
I just
yourself
did.
without
Take a deep breath. Take a deep
yeah.
breath
Take a
because
deep breath. Yeah.
you have about
Best
2 weeks
way.
of no Giants football. I mean, that's
Yeah.
something to look forward to. Come on.
Yeah, there you go. Enjoy your weekend. Do something fun. Get outside. There you go. But thank you, everyone, and we'll see you all. I guess later this week, maybe early next week. During the bye week with some sort of fun, less doom and gloom Giants content. Peace.